along came Pete and Ed, and they founded the Institute for BioSpiritual Research, a nonprofit foundation that has a lot of international reach. So now enter Eugene Genwin. When Ed and Pete encountered Gene's research, a light bulb really went off for them. They'd been familiar with the work of Carl Rogers, who identified the importance of being congruent, expressing feelings in a way that is connected to how we're actually experiencing them. And then he encountered Gene's work regarding the inner experiencing process. And they realized that the inner experiencing process formed the foundation for congruent living. That's really important to connect with our own inner experiencing. And they recognized that Gene's term, the felt sense, captured something that was essential not only for our emotional well-being, but something that was really essential for our spiritual development as well. So they began to envision a spirituality that tapped into the body's own knowing potential, which in turn connected us with a larger living process. So I can only imagine the rich discussions that Pete and Ed had as they were classmates at the University of Ottawa in Canada. They brought together their backgrounds in psychotherapy, the psychological investigation of religion, philosophy, and Christian theology. And they created a profound synthesis of all of that. They recognized that cultivating what they now call the habit of felt sensing, I love that term, the habit of felt sensing, was the key to Teilhard's vision of a human evolution toward a more whole and connected and peace-loving human being. Say a brief story about some of the folklore about how Pete and Ed met Gene, how they became interested. It was in the late 1960s. They were completing their doctoral works. They found out that Gene was in New York on a sabbatical, no doubt trying to escape people like them. So it's not easy to fly all the way from California to New York when you're not sure where somebody lives, not sure you have the right address, not sure he's going to open the door if you come and visit him. So it's rather gutsy. So arriving in New York, they went to where they thought he lived, knocked on the door of the apartment building, rang the bell with great trepidation, and then Gene opened the door. And there stood two young priests in their clerical suits and collars. Maybe a little naive at that time. So they told him who they were, that they'd come out to California just to see him. And then they asked rather sheepishly, can we come up and talk to you for just a little while? So Gene invited them in, only to discover that there was no place for the three of them to sit in Gene's apartments. Rather sparse lifestyle. So he quickly found two crates, and he put two rug samples on the crates. And they sat on top. Gene sat on the couch, on the sofa, asked them what they wanted to talk about. So as they began to ask their questions, the reason that they came out, Gene held up his hand for them to stop. And watching Gene close his eyes, and breathing heavily, and going completely silent in the middle of a conversation, Pete and Ed looked at each other with glances that said, what have we gotten ourselves into here? So then just as suddenly as it disappeared into silence, he opened his eyes and said to them, okay, you guys are okay. You can continue. You feel okay. So obviously Gene was focusing on how it felt to continue the conversation. He wanted to continue. So Gene asked, okay, what's your question? What do you want to talk about? So they asked the most important question that they brought to New York. Do the steps that you call focusing make the felt shift happen? Do the steps you call focusing make the felt shift happen? Or is there another factor at work here? After a short pause, he said, no, the steps don't make it happen. That's what you guys would call grace, a gift factor. And Ed and Pete replied, then we're in business.